Oh yeah, now this is a functional industry. Look at this. It's looking amazing. Hello everyone and welcome to this new devlog on our community project. I haven't been working on this project for quite a while now, so that will be a challenge going back to it. This is when I'm going to see if I did some good clean code or if I just messed it up. As a reminder, I'm working on an automation game crossed with a dungeon crawling game. So the unique twist on this game is that you'll be, as a player, crawling through dungeons and looting resources. The time you take to complete the dungeon and the resources you looted are recorded, and the humanoids you'll save from these dungeons can then be assigned to rerun this dungeon using the same time and looted items as you did. So this system is going to replace the standard ore extractors from classic automation games like Satisfactory or Factorio. In the previous devlogs I said the basics for the dungeon system, and since then I've been mainly focusing on the automation aspect of the game, which is very challenging. Oh, and last thing I forgot, this is a community driven project. If you want to participate in the creation of this project, you can join the Discord server. I'll put the link in the description. The whole game here originates from the community, and this super original game mechanic emerged from a brainstorming session in the Discord. Feel free to also participate through the comments in the YouTube video. I think that's all I had to say, so enjoy the devlog now. So last devlog we left off when I was creating the humanoid UI. So now it's time to fill this UI, starting with the hunger and energy statuses. For the hunger system, I started by creating a field where humanoids can produce food. My production system was flexible enough in order to allow a building to produce something out of no input, so that's good. It would however be cool if there was a visual for this field, so I adapted the item system in order to handle different crop growth stage sprites. But maybe it would look better if I added a random offset whenever a plant changes growth stage sprite, and yeah, indeed it does now look much better. Now I had to make a design decision. Can the workers eat from any inventory where they find food, or should they be heading to a specific building where food is stored? So I submitted this decision to all of you through a poll. It seems like you prefer seeing those humanoids struggle a bit to find their food, and the specific food storage building won this poll. For now, the specific food storage building is just a red chest. I think I'll do something looking better later. In the meanwhile, the hauler system I created reacted very well to the addition of this food system. There didn't seem to be any new bugs. Now it was time to add the feeding logic. So the humanoid's hunger bar deplete at a specific rate, and I struggled to do two things. First of all, I set a threshold under which the humanoid heads to eat some food. But then it wasn't simple to make it so that the humanoid eats until he fills his hunger bar. At first, he would just eat one potato. That made him just fill his hunger bar just enough to be over the threshold, and he'd try to go back to his activity. The second thing I struggled on is more visual, making it so the humanoid takes time to eat each piece of food. But eventually I successed, and it looks quite good now. Next system, energy bars and sleeping. For sleeping, I almost copy and pasted the hunger system, except I had to make another design decision. So again, I consulted my trusty parliament. Can the humanoids sleep on the floor, or do they need a dedicated sleeping building? As my parliament is composed of a majority of people that are very unconcerned with humanoid rights, they voted for making a sleeping building optional. So our humanoids can actually sleep on the floor if they have no building. However, their energy refill rate will be much lower. Lesson: as a good ruler, you should provide housing for your people, or else they won't work efficiently. Anyways, I still added the housing system, and I created the first housing building, which is a tent. Now, if the humanoid is assigned to a housing building, he will head there in priority in order to sleep, because the energy regeneration rate in a building is much higher than on the floor. Okay, so to finish off the sleeping system, I needed to rework the humanoid UI panel in order to show which building they're assigned to for sleeping. I'm not very proud of this panel, so the day started bad, to be honest. I eventually managed to adapt that UI, and so I had one part of the UI control done. The second part of the UI control comes from showing to the player which humanoids are assigned to one specific building. This had some surprising results, but on the second try, it looked just okay. And in order to add more control to the player, here I added this kick button in both the world UI and in the humanoid UI. After a small upgrade on the tent visual, I was ready to head to the next big system. This system is one of the main resource sinks in our game, which is the humanoid equipment. Some of the crafting recipes will allow you to create equipment for the humanoids, thus increasing their stats. So as usual, I like to start with the UI. It's something that one, I don't really enjoy doing, so that's one thing out of the way, and two, it allows me to see straight away if the logic is working without having to start with adding debug logs. So I set different stats for different humanoid types. Orcs have more strength and goblins have more speed. And then for the equipment, I created 6 different equipment slots. A main slot and a secondary slot, a head slot and boot slot, and 2 trinket slots. In order to show these slots are empty to the player, I added a standard equipment sprite with low transparency. I think this looks good. So now it was time to tackle the hard part. As for the food system, the humanoids will be able to pick their equipment only in specialized buildings. So I created an equipment chest to start with, and when you try setting a humanoid's equipment through his humanoid panel, the system I created shuffles through all the equipment chests in order to show what they contain. From this new sub-panel, you can then select the equipment you want your humanoid to equip. Right now he should be heading to get equipped, but he's starving, and the starving system has a higher priority over the equipment system, and there's no food available. Now here's a cool demonstration of this functional system. I'm putting different types of equipment in different chests. As you can see, I added this small icon to show he's heading to fetch that equipment, and I remove it when he equips it. So yeah, that's one thing working. This may not seem like it, but the equipment system at this stage already took almost the whole day to create. The last thing I did on day 20 was adding stat bonuses to the equipment and making the humanoids UI responsive to those bonuses. Quiz time! I am an automation game similar to Satisfactory. By the way, Satisfactory, on which Julian has spent way too much time in his life. I feature a cute little guide robot, and the player itself is a robot. I can't think much more of how to describe this game. I am. If you thought Foundry, you were right. So as I mentioned, in Foundry you play a robot, and you are going to build a huge factory. I think I can assume that if you're here, you've already played an automation game. So I'm going to skip the automation mechanic explanation and head straight to what sets this game apart from Satisfactory. First of all, this is a voxel game, so you can destroy the environment around you. Secondly, resource veins are depletable. This does impact the gameplay hugely, at least during the early and mid stages of the game. The way you extract minerals is also different. You aren't limited to one extractor per ore vein. You can set up as many drone miner buildings as you want for each resource vein. And finally, how this game markets itself apart from Satisfactory is the ability to create huge modular buildings and robot construction lines. In my current run, I have unlocked the modular building part of the game, so this looks really awesome actually, but I still yet have to unlock the robot production lines. But my impressions so far after 20 hours of gameplay are pretty positive. When I decided to buy this game, this was mainly because I wanted to play an automation game, but I already have 2 complete runs on Satisfactory, so I just didn't want to go through the exact same process again. And even though the early stages of the game are really similar to Satisfactory, in the mid stages now it really starts setting itself apart, and I am enjoying this game. I would recommend this game definitely, but if you're like me and once you've done a run of a game you have to wait like at least a year in order to launch it again, I'd recommend you'd wait a few more months until 1 or 2 more major updates have been released. Playing this game also made me realize how my automation systems are really bad. Of course I'm comparing myself to like a real development studio team here, and a game that required, I'm not sure, but at least a month of development. That's not a fair comparison, but still it hurts a lot. Okay, so with the equipment system I prepared, we have one main problem. There might be a lot of different items to equip to the humanoids. As I said, there are 6 different slots, and in each of these slots we might have different types of equipment. For example, the main slot might feature swords, which have a major damage bonus, or spears, which are cheaper and have a lower damage bonus. So that led me to create a new sub-categorization of the equipment. Using this, I could start creating the auto-assignment system. What do I mean by this? Well, while While you progress in the game, you will unlock higher and higher tiers of the same equipment types. You'll start with wooden swords, then you might go to stone swords and copper swords, etc. And you don't want to be reassigning every dungeon years to which you've equipped a sword the next sword tier. So the auto-assign system is very simple. If in the available equipment there is a higher tier equipment than the one that is currently equipped, the humanoid will go equip that higher tier equipment. This relieves a bit of micromanagement for the player. Of course, I added a button to deactivate that option if the player wants more control on this. Now, in order for the equipment system to be an actual resource sink, I think it's necessary for the equipment to have a limited durability. So I started working as usual on the UI for the durability, starting with a durability bar, but I thought I could find better. Using the outline of the slots and a circular fill amount, I found a way to make this durability blend really well into the UI. I then made it so when an item is out of durability, the humanoid goes to fetch another one, but that could quickly become annoying for low durability items. So even though it's not very realistic, now a humanoid can carry multiple amounts of the same item. I set this to 5 for the moment, and we'll see later how to balance this. Something that I apprehend a lot is how to communicate the huge amount of information required for the player. In order to bring my stress levels down, I created a first tooltip system specific to the equipment stats. So now when you hover over an equipment type, you can see the equipment stat bonuses and their durability. Now it's really cool to have some stats for the humanoids, but they're totally useless right now. So it's finally the time to make these stats have some impact on the gameplay. But before that, during the brainstorming phase of this project, we thought it would be cool if the different humanoids have proficiencies in different types of jobs. So that's one of the two systems that will impact the productivity of the different machines in the overworld. For example, here the dwarves have a proficiency for metalwork, so they will be working 150% faster than the other humanoid types. That's just an example. I'll have to set the actual proficiencies later, but the system is here and implemented. Now the second thing that will impact the productivity of the different machines is the humanoid overworld stats. Those are strength, intelligence, dexterity, and speed. I can then set a specific stat that will affect the machine's productivity, and the higher the humanoid stat, the higher the machine's productivity. This is for the overworld stats. Now there are also dungeon stats, and this is where I added new systems for these stats to have an impact on the game. Welcome the health system. Humanoids now have a health bar that will only deplete when they are in dungeons. If his health reaches 0, he's forced out of the dungeon with reduced loot, and he has to take some time to rest and recover. The health stat itself just increases the global health pool of a humanoid, so it also increases his survivability in the dungeons. For the damage stat, dungeons now have a recommended damage level, and if the humanoid's damage stat is lower than this recommended damage level, then they will loot only a reduced number of items from that dungeon. I haven't found a use for the armor stat yet, so I'm requesting your ideas here, YouTube. What can I do with the armor? I thought it could just reduce the damage took by the humanoid, but I guess it just comes back to increasing the global health pool. I don't know, it's not very original and interesting. So if you have a cool idea, drop it down in the comments down below. I'll be glad to read it. In order to work correctly on the impact of the dungeon stats on the loot, I added a UI panel in the humanoid UI in order to show his current inventory. This is not only super useful for development, but also for the players. The final small tweak I did on day 21 is that I reused my sleeping system in the health system, so that if the dungeoneer has a house assigned, he will head to that house in order to rest. Maybe later I could add a specific building like a field hospital in order for dungeoneers to regenerate their health faster, but for now I just kept it simple and they will just head to their current house. Now on day 21, I was done with adding systems and I really wanted to get on with this game. I was determined to set up the first production chains, and for this I had to start adding content, new buildings, items, and recipes. I had already added on my spare time a few buildings, but I still had a lot of work left. That took quite a while actually, and as I said previously, I had already prepared all the animations for these buildings, so that saved me a couple hours. Now look at how many buildings I had ready after this. And that was all for the production buildings, which brings us to a total of 16 production buildings. I also worked on 2 new housing buildings, so we have a hammock that can house 1 humanoid, the tent which can house 2 humanoids, and the actual house which can house up to 5 humanoids. The buildings were already organized into 5 categories: raw processing stations, assembly stations, food production, containers, and utility buildings. And then I used the proficiency system in order to subcategorize them. This makes the UI look a bit cleaner. It took me a lot of time to do that, however. Now it was finally time to start working on the production chains, and to have a starting point, I went back to the brainstorming forum in my Discord server. I remembered that some members had already proposed a few ideas for resources and production chains, and this really helped me out to get in the mindset of creating production chains. During this design session, I tried to define what are the primary resources and for what they will be used. I took note of which buildings were missing in the game, and I tried designing a few production chains, but actually it was super hard planning the production chains from start to finish, from early game to end game. So after an hour or so trying to do this, I kind of gave up on the idea of planning all the resource production chains, but I still had the basic production chains laid down on paper. That was good enough to start for now. Now let me show you a few examples of production chains. Here I'm setting up a basic wooden sword production chain. So we have raw wood that is processed into wooden planks in lumber mills. These wooden planks are processed into wooden blades and wooden handles in woodwork benches. And finally, in a last woodwork bench, we can assemble these handles and these blades into a wooden sword. Now for an example of a slightly more complex production line, let's look at the ring item that is built in the jeweler. For this we're going to need a wooden chisel and some copper bars. The wooden chisel is built out of a wooden handle and of cut stone, which is processed in the stonecutter building from raw stone, and the copper bar is made in a smelter from copper ore. Now for a last production chain, let's look at a food production chain, a very classic one with bread. So you can grow wheat in a field, it just goes in a windmill, transform into flour, and the flour is used in the kitchen to bake bread. As you might have noticed, I just added the windmill, which is a pre-made building in the MiniFantasy Assets. What's really awesome with these assets is that you can also create custom buildings from pieces of assets in different packs or in the same pack. Here, for example, I was looking for a multi-purpose assembly building. This one will be used for more complex recipes, and so I went in the Dwarven Workshop pack, and there was everything I needed to create a really cool custom building. A lot of factory stuff is happening in that building, you can imagine. And by the way, if you're interested in these assets, go check out the affiliate link in the description. I'm working in partnership with the creator of these assets. He's an awesome indie pixel artist, and there's so much content. We are running a huge discount on the whole collection. Just know that by using the link in the description, you're supporting this channel too. Day 23 is the day I implemented the research system, but first I realized one crucial building was missing in order to create the research items. In fact, I want those research items to be potions. We can call them knowledge potions, and we'll have tier 1 knowledge potions, tier 2 and tier 3, etc. Basically like in most automation games. And in order to craft those research potions, well, I started to create a production chain for the glass vial. So we have a furnace that melts down sand using charcoal, and this creates glass, which is used in a smelter to create glass vials. And to fill up those potions, for example, let's say a tier 1 potion, we're going to use flowers, which are in the grinder building, grinded down into flour powder. So that's for the research items, and now the research system itself works kind of like Factorio's research system. So you're going to create these potions, and then in the research menu you select a specific research. In this game you can unlock buildings and recipes. Once you select a research, all of the architect tables are going to be set to work on that research. So each research requires a certain amount of items, and I had to rework the production system in order to adapt it to an architect table. Basically in my production system I had to have both input items in order to work, and it would produce an output item. Here the first difference is that you don't necessarily have to have both input items, you can only have one and progress on this specific item, and there is no output produced. The output is progression on the current selected research. So that was pretty hard to adapt. It sounds easy, but like everything is adapted to my initial production system. So the workers AI had to be reworked, and now I still have the haulers AI to adapt because I'm pretty sure it's completely broken now. And once I'll have done that, I'll also have to create some conditions on the research in order to create the actual research tree. That's basically all for day 23 and for this devlog. I think the end of this devlog is a good moment to share with you my impressions with this project, as when I announced it 4 months ago, I was planning 20 to 30 development days, so we're already almost there now. I have to admit, when I started working on this session, I had lost a lot of motivation on this project. In 4 months, I've been doing a ton of progress, and I feel like some of the systems I created when I started this game are really outdated compared to my skills right now. Moreover, I think I've been going way too wild in the different systems I've implemented there. Basically, what I've been doing for the first 20 days is throwing in different systems, a lot of them, and now when it comes to building the game, I kind of feel overwhelmed by all these systems and all the content there is to add in order to make a proper experience. Also, the choice of the game genre, automation, was very ambitious. An automation game has so many linked systems, and everything, especially the UI, needs to be very well coordinated in order to work smoothly. As I'm working on a main project since January, and I think I still have a lot of work on that main project too, at least until the end of 2024, I'd like to keep my YouTube channel as a space to experiment different concepts. And I feel like I'm slowly getting stuck on that community project, but I also really like this project and the game idea behind it. But despite trying to keep the scope small, adding all these systems made the game grow more and more, and that's totally on me. I kind of failed when scoping this project, and I feel like there's a lot of expectations now with this project. And now I'm really struggling to find the balance between a professional project like my game Hidden Tactics and a small amateur project like my previous game jam, which are unfinished, and that's totally fine. I'd also be very frustrated of dropping it right now because that would feel really unfinished, and I also feel like I owe you all something since you've been participating actively in the creation of it. So now that all of that is said, first of all, I feel much better because I had to share it, and that might also explain some of my future choices on this project. To be realistic on the situation here, I think I have at least 10 to 15 more working days in order to get a bare minimum viable product. I think I won't be optimizing every aspect of the game, and there will be a lot of space for improvement at the end of this project. So yeah, 5 more days on our community project. I've been through a lot of mental states this week. I'm really happy with what I accomplished this week. I'm hoping to have a playtest version of the game after my next working session. There's still quite a lot to do. Of course, if you want to make sure not to miss the playtesting session, don't forget to join the Discord server. That's where I post all the updates and everything about this game. So thanks for sticking up with me on this project. Thanks for watching this episode. Ah putain, il fait sombre. It's dark. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like and everything. And of course, press play.